Welcome into a brand new hour of CBS Sports HQ presented by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Make every moment more. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino. We have more to come from the fellas in just a moment, but we have a lot to go over and a lot to recap so far from Week 15 before we preview not the one, but two Monday night games that we got to talk about. The potential Super Bowl preview with Josh Allen and the Bills against Jared Goff and the Lions certainly lived up to the hype. There was a whole lot of points, a whole lot of passing touchdowns, and for Jared Goff, that doesn't necessarily work in his favor, right? So the highest scoring game in the NFL this season, Josh Allen over to Ray Davis. We saw Josh Allen do what he does best as well, go on the move, use those legs. He went 23 of 34 for 362 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, leading Buffalo to a 48-42 win over the Lions. Buffalo, they have won 8 of their last 9 after starting the season 3-2. That seems like a lifetime ago. But back to Josh Allen, certainly separating himself in the conversation from some of the other players when it comes to MVP. He is the -900 favorite, only ahead of Lamar Jackson, Saquon Barkley there at 15-1. The Bills now sitting at 11-3, and they get the Patriots on Sunday. Now over to another team that has clinched their division. That belongs to the Kansas City Chiefs in action against Cleveland yesterday. The Chiefs had a big lead early on. This is Mahomes to Xavier Worthy. That touchdown put the Chiefs up 21-0. We also saw Mahomes over to Juju Smith-Schuster. This is the final 8 minutes of the game, though. After this touchdown, that is when we kind of saw some troubling things for Patrick Mahomes getting twisted up on this play, that high ankle sprain. Here's more from Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say right now. I mean, obviously, you're still adrenaline rolling, and usually it's kind of the day after is when you kind of get a good sense of it. But I feel like I could have finished the game in different circumstances. But I thought the smart decision, I think we talked about, was to put Carson in, and he's played a lot of football, and he finished the game well. Obviously, 4th down, trying to make a play happen. And as I threw the ball, I kind of got hit, and I haven't seen it, but it felt like someone hit me from behind as well. And so I kind of just got rolled up on. It kind of happens in football, and so. Try to bounce back up, but obviously it hurt a little bit. But now we'll just get after the rehab part of it and try to be ready for next week.
All right, they're getting ready for next week and getting a look at the current AFC playoff picture. The Chiefs currently sitting in that 1 seed at 13-1. The Bills, they are in the 2 seed at 11-3. Steelers, they clinched a playoff spot, not the position, or excuse me, the division just yet. The AFC North is not clinched completely. The Texans, though, clinching the AFC South for the 2nd consecutive season. And then those wild card teams so far, if the season ended today, Ravens, Broncos, and the Chargers, Colts, Dolphins, and the Bengals currently on the outside looking in. Speaking of the Dolphins being on the outside looking in, I started Tua in fantasy over Baker Mayfield, and I'm literally kicking myself, guys, because Baker and the Bucs dropping a 40-burger on the Chargers. We saw that first drive of the game there. Baker to McMillan, and then, of course, Baker to Mike Evans. We saw it time and time again. That was a 57-yard touchdown. More for Mike Evans here, a 35-yard touchdown, and the Bucs go on to win it 40-17. Tampa Bay on a 4-game win streak since their bye, outscoring the Chargers 27-0 in the second half. Getting a look at those standings, it's crazy to think that we were once talking about the Falcons being on top of this division, and they have since kind of fumbled the bag, if you will. The Bucs, they are sitting at the top at 8-6, and it looks like if everything keeps going the way it's going and Baker and the Bucs are playing the way they are, despite some injuries that we've seen, they should handle the division, but there's more to talk about there. Let's go to Seattle, shall we, with the Packers and the Seahawks. The Seahawks leading the NFC West going into this one, but of course that all changes. Josh Jacobs getting things going early for Green Bay. Now we have Jordan Love, Romeo Doubs. That puts the Packers up here 14-0. Packers in the red zone again. Jordan Love into the end zone for Dobbs, and they seal the deal 30-13. The Packers now at 10-4. They get the Saints on the next Monday Night Football. But getting a look at the current NFC playoff picture, the Lions, they are still sitting at the top. Philly, the Bucs, they're leading their division over the Falcons with the way they're playing, dropping a 40-burger there. The Rams, they're 4th, and the Vikings, Green Bay, Washington, those are the wild card teams, but there is still a path for the Vikings to potentially catch the Lions in the division in the NFC North, or potentially even getting that 1 seed in the NFC. There's a lot to discuss, a lot to get over, so let's send it over to Jeremy St. Louis, Mike Renner, and Leger Douzable to paint the playoff picture for us, if you will. That was a lot to take in, fellas.
That was a lot to take in. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Great start to the show as we welcome these guys in to talk about the teams that are in the hunt. Let's start in that NFC West, talking about Seattle, because it has been a ride this season in that NFC West. Seahawks entered the week as the 3 seed in the NFC, but after losing to the Packers last night, now they're the first team out. They're still in this, but the margin for error, Leger, has really gotten slim.
Yeah, there is no margin for error because they have a date with the Minnesota Vikings coming up, and they still have to go to L.A. in Week 18. So a major missed opportunity for the Seattle Seahawks. They had Green Bay at their house, and they literally got punched in the mouth. That's exactly what Matt LaFleur wanted to come out and do. He wanted to establish a run with Josh Jacobs. As a matter of fact, Mike, on the first 8 plays, Josh Jacobs was the only guy to touch the ball. And I think after that, Jordan Love had to scramble, and then Josh Jacobs touched it again for a touchdown. So they lost the physical battle now. The defense showed up more in the second half, but when Geno Smith goes out of the game, Sam Howell was almost a shell of himself. He just continued to hold the ball too long, wasn't seeing the field well. So there's real concerns with the Seattle Seahawks, especially if Geno Smith cannot continue to play.
Yeah, we saw the defense turn around the second half. I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about this offensive line, pass protecting for a banged-up Geno Smith, because not only did they play the Vikings next week, who obviously press you, but then they have a short week on a Thursday night. So he's not going to have that full time to rest, get back healthy, and be under center. And we saw what Sam Howell looked like. They ain't going to win any games the rest of the season if they're throwing him out there.
Well, and the way they finish, I mean, we mentioned Minnesota, then they go to Chicago, and you guys mentioned the Rams. That game against the Rams, I mean, if they do keep winning, that pretty much could decide who gets in terms of the division winner and possibly a wild card spot. The Cardinals that stay in that division, they got a much-needed win over the Patriots. They get the Panthers next, but then they finish versus the Rams and Niners, sitting a game back right now. The Cards essentially, I mean, much like Seattle, they got to win out, Mike.
Yeah, I think they kind of control their own destiny still. Not technically, because of obviously the Seahawks being ahead of them and them owning the tiebreaker, but we just saw what happened with Geno Smith. We know they got the Vikings on tap. If they can win out, because they got the Rams on their schedule too in a couple weeks here, if they can win that game and win out then in the 49ers in Week 18, I think they end up taking the division. Now, easier said than done with the way they've been playing lately. This was a much-needed win, but it doesn't cure what they've looked like the past handful of weeks. But I do think they still have a very good shot of making it if they can right the ship at this point in time.
Yeah, Mike, those two guys we're seeing on the screen right now, right? It was James Conner and Trey McBride's show yesterday, and they got back on track, and they played the Patriots at the right time. They were coming off 3 straight losses. 2 out of the last 3 was versus divisional foes in the Seattle Seahawks. We saw Kyler Murray take care of the football, and he hadn't done that the last 3 weeks. I'm with Mike. I mean, this is a team that I said would muddle around, maybe 8-9, 9-8, and have a potential to get into the playoffs. Well, they're in that predicament right now. If they win out and then they end up beating the Rams, they could find themselves sneaking into that 7th spot into the playoffs. So it'll be interesting. We've been calling this the Wild Wild West. Well, it's really going to come down to these last few weeks.
Yeah, it could end up with 3 teams sitting at 10-7 in this division, which would certainly make things very, very interesting in terms of the tiebreakers. All right, staying in the NFC, let's go to the Commanders. They clinched their first winning season since 2016, a nail-biter versus New Orleans. They're just clinging to that final playoff spot in the NFC. How confident are you in the Commanders right now, Mike?
I'm still confident because I think this defense has had a massive turnaround from early on the season, especially when you add Marshawn Lattimore to the lineup this past weekend. Didn't get targeted once. That's massive, brings some stability to that cornerback position, but we need some explosive plays from this offense. It's been dry, the well has been the last 5 weeks. Last 5 games, only 4 deep completions for Jaden Daniels. That just ain't going to cut. He's a great deep ball thrower, but that aspect of the offense has just gone out the window. Needs to come back. When it does, I still think this Washington Commanders team is dangerous. Could even win a playoff game.
Yeah, with that guy at quarterback, you always have an opportunity and a chance to win. He's just so cool, calm, and collective. And you talked about some of these deep throws. Look at him. They missed on 3 of these to Terry McLaurin that just went off his fingertips.
And he had 2 touchdowns.
Two went off his fingertips, and he had 2 touchdowns. So, like, I'm not too concerned. Now, I am concerned about the protection. Jaden Daniels was sacked 7 times in the first 3 quarters, and he finished the game getting sacked 8 times. Tyler Biadasz was out. That was a major loss for them. So you hope that he comes back to really solidify that offensive line because Jaden Daniels can't keep taking hits like that.
Well, they haven't been able to run the ball either.
And that's another thing, right? Brian Robinson, this offense goes as he goes. And we saw when he was out of the lineup, people were saying, Jaden Daniels is beat up. Well, no, he didn't have his running mate with him, so there was no threat of a physical run game. So teams really didn't respect the Commanders' run game, and that's what the the Saints did yesterday. They took away the run and put it on Jaden Daniels and those receivers. Now, he made enough plays at the end of the game to win that game, and the defense stood up tall on a 2-point conversion that the Saints shouldn't even been able to attempt because the clock should have ran out at the end of that game. But if you're Jaden Daniels, you cannot continue to take these hits. To your point, Jeremy, they have to establish the run game with Brian Robinson. He is the focal point of that offense.
And Commanders host the Eagles in Week 16, so it doesn't get any better in terms of that offensive line. Certainly going to need some help when it comes to playing on that Philadelphia Eagles team. Over in the AFC, the Chargers were exposed by the Bucs on Sunday. Have now lost 3 of their last 4. Look, they still have a 2-game lead over the Colts and the Dolphins in terms of that playoff chase. They're in control here, but Leger, this seems more about the teams below them that aren't really capitalizing.
Yeah, to me, this is where the Chargers were going to always be because of the lack of talent on the roster, and eventually that was going to come to bite them. And I think we see that happen in Germany, right? When you look at what they've done on defense, shout out to Coach Jesse Minter. He's gotten the most out of the talent that's on that roster. But when you go against a guy like Mike Evans, right, and you start throwing shoulders into him, he's not going down. You have to wrap up Mike Evans. Tarhib Steele decides to throw a shoulder into this guy. He bounces off him and runs 60 yards to the house for a touchdown. And then Mike Evans sets him up on an outside release and then runs the post and is wide open for a touchdown. Mike and Jeremy, do you know the Bucs did not punt yesterday? Right, they turned it over twice. That's how the Chargers got the ball back. They never punted yesterday. They scored 27 unanswered in the second half. Right, you cannot win games doing that. And then again, I think it's the lack of talent, not only on the defensive side, but the offensive side has finally caught up to the Chargers.
Yeah, they had such an easy schedule early on that we kind of got lulled into thinking this was an elite defense. Yeah. It's a very good defense because they are very well coached.
Correct.
But then we've seen in recent weeks 27 to the Bengals, 30 to the Ravens, and now 40 to the Bucs. It's like when you face teams that have dudes on the outside, the Chargers just can't go toe-to-toe. You can't play man coverage against Mike Evans. It ain't going to work out. You don't have the guys to do it, unfortunately. So I think we're seeing that with them. It's a good team. It feels like a team that's a year away from being a great team.
Chargers are home to the Broncos next week. Of those chasing teams that we've mentioned, the Dolphins quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, says, you know what, hey, we're not done fighting for a playoff spot yet. Take a listen to this.
This team, loves to play the game. We don't take this game for granted. This is something that we all dreamed of playing when we were, super young. And we'd watch primetime games on TV. We'd watch our favorite game or favorite teams play on TV. So for us to, say, let's go plan our trip to Cabo or let's go plan a trip to Mexico, you really start to see the guys that want to be in the locker room, the guys that want to play for each other. And I think that's the guys we have in our locker room.
All right, so the way it kind of shapes up is you have the Colts, Dolphins, and Bengals that are sitting there that are kind of still in the playoff picture here. Mike, of those 3 teams, who do you think has the best shot at getting in?
I think the Bengals do, just because I think their offense is still humming the best, right? And they have their opportunity ahead of them. I believe they play the Broncos in a couple weeks, and if they win that game, that's their path to them winning out and the Broncos losing out. That's how they end up getting in. But I just don't see it with this Dolphins team. I do think their offensive line right now is not good enough. And Jacqueline, as a former Cincinnati resident, you should have known, if they're starting Jack Carmen at right tackle, the pass protection was not going to be good enough. So for Tua Tagovailoa to be putting up numbers out there, and I just don't see it going down the stretch.
Yeah, again, I've been saying for the last few weeks, I think the playoffs have been set in the AFC going back 3 weeks, just because when you look at the Dolphins, Bengals, I believe they just dug a hole that they're not going to be able to get out of. Bengals, their defense continues to struggle. Now, they did get some big plays from their defense yesterday, but that's what happens when you play Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans, right? He gives you the football away. I just think that the Broncos defense alone will keep them in the hunt. We saw it yesterday. Their offense didn't play well at all.
Yeah.
The Denver Broncos defense and special teams won them that game yesterday, and I think they'll win enough games down the stretch. And I believe the Bengals, the Colts, and the Dolphins have just lost too many games earlier in the season to try to catch up and get into that playoff hunt. But I'm with Mike. If you were to pick one of those 3 teams, because of what Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase does on offense, I think they have the best chance to maybe sneak into the playoffs.
And they have the toughest schedule of the remaining team. The Colts have the easiest schedule. They have the Titans, Giants, Jags to finish. A combined record so far of 8-34. So, I mean, it's all on your plate there, Colts. NFL Today on CBS brings you expert insights, bold predictions, exclusive player interviews, and breaking news each and every week. Be sure you're locked into the NFL Today, where every Sunday feels like a Super Bowl Sunday, only on CBS.